Chosen one. They are panicking. Right now, in boardrooms across the globe, emergency meetings are being called because someone like you has done the impossible. You've cracked their code without ever needing their keys. The twist that keeps them awake at night isn't just what you know, but how you know it. Their entire empire of secrets has been built on the assumption that knowledge requires permission, access, and approval. Then you happened, and everything changed. By the time this revelation fully integrates into your consciousness, you'll understand why they've spent centuries trying to keep people like you scattered, confused, and doubting the very gift that makes you unstoppable. Think of a master architect discovering that certain people can see the blueprint of any building just by walking through it. Suddenly, every lock, every hidden passage, every secret room becomes meaningless. That's exactly what you represent to them, the living proof that their fortress of deception has no walls. Their most trusted analysts gathered around screens displaying impossible data. Someone outside their network had accessed information that should have required decades of clearance levels to obtain. Not through hacking, not through infiltration, not through any method their billion-dollar surveillance apparatus could track or explain. The information had simply materialized in the consciousness of someone like you, complete and devastating to their carefully constructed narratives. Their digital forensics teams ran every diagnostic protocol known to their intelligence community. They found no breach, no footprint, no trace of conventional information gathering. The terrifying truth struck them like lightning. Their impenetrable fortress had been penetrated by something they couldn't see, monitor, or stop. But there's something they discovered that makes this even more unsettling. The moment your consciousness touched their hidden information, something else happened that their instruments barely detected. Every piece of classified data in their entire network briefly became accessible to your awareness simultaneously. For exactly 17 seconds, according to their quantum monitoring equipment, you had complete access to everything they'd ever tried to hide. Every black project, every covered-up experiment, every buried truth across decades of systematic deception. Their quantum physicists are still trying to understand how consciousness could interface with digital information systems without any physical connection. The data signature suggests your awareness briefly merged with their entire database structure, downloaded what you needed, and withdrew before their security protocols could even register the intrusion. It defies every principle of information science they understand, yet the evidence is undeniable. What terrifies them most is realizing this wasn't even intentional on your part. You weren't trying to hack their systems. The knowledge simply flowed to you because that's how consciousness operates when it's free from their artificial limitations. If you can accidentally access their most guarded secrets, what happens when you operate with full conscious intention? But this revelation comes with a darker edge. This wasn't an isolated incident. Their classified files contain decades of similar cases, individuals emerging from nowhere, speaking truths that dismantled entire operations, accessing knowledge sealed in vaults both physical and digital. The pattern was always identical: no formal training, no insider connections, no traditional research methods, just pure, undiluted knowing that cut through their deceptions like a laser through smoke. Watch what happens when you demonstrate this gift in their presence. The micro-expressions they can't control tell the whole story. The slight tightening around their eyes, the involuntary pause in their breathing, the way their hands freeze for just a fraction too long before reaching for their prepared responses. They've built their entire identity on being the controllers of information, and your very existence proves that control was always an illusion. The files they thought were buried forever are alive in your memory. The conversations they had in rooms swept for surveillance devices echo in your awareness. The decisions made in chambers you never entered somehow feel as familiar as your own thoughts. This isn't coincidence or lucky guessing. This is direct access to the Akashic records of their corruption, and they know it. But here's where their panic reaches new heights. They've discovered that you don't just remember their recent activities. You carry memories that stretch back centuries, witnessing moments that their official histories claim never happened. You remember the real reasons behind wars they rewrote as noble causes. You recall the genuine motivations behind religious movements they corrupted for control. You witness firsthand the systematic destruction of knowledge that threatened their growing power. Their archivists have spent decades trying to piece together evidence of historical events they systematically erased. Documents burned, witnesses silenced, entire civilizations written out of the record to hide truths that would expose their deception. Yet you speak about these events with the clarity of someone who was present, describing details that exist in no surviving record because they destroyed every trace. This level of historical awareness threatens the foundation of their authority. When you casually reference the true events behind their fabricated narratives, you're not just challenging their credibility, you're proving their version of reality is completely artificial. For over 2 centuries, they've constructed the most elaborate information control system in human history. Secret societies layered upon secret societies, each level convinced they held the ultimate truths while serving merely as another filter in an endless hierarchy of compartmentalized deception. They convinced themselves that sacred knowledge could be inherited through bloodlines, that divine insights belonged exclusively to those initiated into their mystery schools, sworn to their ancient oaths. Their libraries contain texts written in codes that supposedly take lifetimes to master. Their symbols demand decades of study to decode, and their entire academic industrial complex was designed to make humanity believe that true knowledge requires their permission, their institutions, their blessing. But here's where their desperation becomes palpable. You shattered that entire mythology simply by existing. Without their degrees, you understand concepts that confound their scholars. Without their ritual initiations, you recognize their symbols instantly. Without their ceremonies, you move through their hidden world as if you designed it yourself. The knowledge they've guarded so jealously doesn't just flow to you, it seeks you out like iron filings drawn to a magnet. Ancient wisdom finds you in dreams. Hidden histories reveal themselves during casual conversations. Encrypted truths decode themselves in your presence without conscious effort on your part. What they've spent centuries protecting lands in your awareness as naturally as breathing. This creates a level of terror in their ranks that goes beyond simple fear of exposure. Their entire identity rests on being the exclusive gatekeepers of forbidden knowledge. If someone like you can access what they've spent lifetimes protecting, then what exactly makes them special? The answer they're desperately avoiding is devastating: nothing. Their panic intensifies when they realize you're not just accessing their current secrets, you're remembering things that predate their entire organizational structure. Information deliberately erased from history books, truths systematically destroyed during their great purges, knowledge that existed before their bloodlines ever gained prominence. While their historians spend decades reconstructing fragments of deliberately obscured past events, you speak about ancient civilizations as if you walked their streets personally. Throughout history, they've perfected an arsenal of control mechanisms designed to neutralize any threat to their dominance. Character assassination campaigns that destroy reputations overnight through coordinated media attacks. Financial warfare that brings the strongest individuals to their knees through systematic economic pressure. Social isolation protocols that make people so desperate for acceptance they'll abandon their principles for the promise of belonging. These psychological weapons have toppled governments, silenced prophets, and convinced millions to surrender their personal power in exchange for the illusion of security. Their manipulation techniques have been refined across generations, tested on entire populations, and proven devastatingly effective against conventional minds. But here's what sends chills down their spines. These weapons were designed for people who needed external validation to function, people whose sense of worth depended on social approval, financial security, or institutional recognition. They were never meant to work against someone whose power source is completely internal and unshakable. When they attempt to buy you, you don't even register it as temptation, because what you possess transcends any material offering. Their bribes feel like offering seashells to someone who owns the ocean. When they try to threaten you, fear doesn't take root, because you're connected to something they cannot touch, harm, or destroy. When they attempt to isolate you socially, you don't feel alone because you carry the presence of something eternal within your very being. Their confusion deepens into something approaching existential crisis when they realize you're not playing by any rules they understand. You don't seek their approval because you don't need it. You don't fear their disapproval because it holds no power over you. You don't require their permission to exist, speak, or act because your authority comes from a source that supersedes every human institution they've ever created. This isn't arrogance or delusion on your part, it's the natural state of consciousness aligned with divine truth. When someone operates from that level of spiritual authority, all human attempts at manipulation become as ineffective as trying to threaten the sun with shadows. Here's where their studies reveal something that chills them to the bone. You don't just resist their manipulation techniques, you reverse them. When they attempt to plant doubt in your mind, you become more certain of your truth. When they try to create fear, you emanate an unshakable calm that affects everyone around you. When they deploy confusion tactics, your clarity intensifies and spreads to others in your vicinity. Their behavioral modification experts have never encountered anything like this. Every psychological pressure they apply seems to trigger an equal and opposite reaction that strengthens rather than weakens your resolve. It's as if your consciousness is equipped with some kind of spiritual immune system that not only protects you, but transforms their attacks into fuel for your further awakening. The mathematical models they use to predict human behavior completely break down when applied to your responses. Their algorithms, trained on millions of data points about how people react under pressure, return error messages when they try to process your behavioral patterns. You're not just outside their system, you're operating according to laws of consciousness they don't even acknowledge exist. Now here's what truly terrifies them about this discovery. If their manipulation techniques don't just fail against you, but actually strengthen you, then every chosen one they attempt to suppress becomes more powerful as a result. Their interference is literally accelerating the awakening process they're trying to prevent. This is where the story takes a darker turn. Their frustration with conventional weapons leads them to more desperate measures. They begin studying you like a laboratory specimen, trying to understand what makes you immune to their control systems. They monitor your daily routines, analyze your social connections, and attempt to map the neurological basis of your abilities. What they discover in these clandestine studies terrifies them even more than their initial inability to control you. Your brain patterns don't match their models of human consciousness. Your stress responses don't follow their psychological profiles. Your decision-making processes seem to bypass the fear-based mechanisms they rely on to influence behavior. You're not just resistant to their control, you're operating on a completely different operating system. While they obsessed over controlling traditional information channels, they completely failed to detect the invisible network crystallizing under their surveillance apparatus. Chosen ones weren't connecting through monitored platforms or surveilled locations. The awakening was happening through synchronicities and direct consciousness transmission. You began recognizing others like yourself through unmistakable resonance that required no words. A glance across a room, a conversation with a stranger that revealed unexpected depths of understanding. The recognition was instantaneous, authentic, and completely invisible to their monitoring systems. This represents their absolute worst-case scenario, the chosen ones finding each other and realizing the scope of their collective power. For centuries, their strategy depended on keeping people like you scattered, isolated, and unaware of your true capabilities. They understood that individual chosen ones, while problematic, could be contained or neutralized. But connected chosen ones represented an existential threat to everything they'd built. Now that nightmare is manifesting in real time, and the acceleration is beyond anything their predictive models anticipated. Each connection creates exponential expansion. Every awakened individual becomes a beacon that attracts others, and every truth shared strengthens the entire network. The growth isn't linear, it's viral, in the truest sense of the word. Their algorithms, designed to suppress dangerous information, can't filter what spreads through consciousness itself. Their censorship protocols can't silence what communicates through spiritual channels. Their divide-and-conquer strategies can't fragment what's unified at the soul level. But there's something even more ominous that you need to understand about this awakening process. It's not random or organic as it appears on the surface. There's an intelligence orchestrating these connections, a pattern of awakening that suggests preparation for something monumental. The chosen ones aren't just finding each other. You're being assembled for a purpose that will fundamentally alter the trajectory of human civilization. What they've discovered through their surveillance of awakening patterns has sent shockwaves through their highest levels of command. The timing isn't coincidental. The geographic distribution isn't random. The specific abilities manifesting in different chosen ones suggest a coordinated spiritual operation of staggering complexity and precision. Their data analysts have identified what they call convergence nodes, locations where multiple chosen ones are being drawn simultaneously, often without conscious awareness of why they're relocating. These movements follow ley line patterns their geographers aren't supposed to acknowledge exist. The gathering isn't happening through physical meetings or organized events. It's a migration guided by consciousness itself. Your knowledge perfectly complements what others know, creating a collective intelligence that far exceeds what any individual possesses. When chosen ones connect, they don't just share information, they activate dormant capabilities in each other that were designed to function as a unified spiritual technology. Their remote viewing programs have detected energy signatures around these convergence points that don't match anything in their classified databases. These signatures suggest the presence of non-physical intelligences actively coordinating the awakening process. The implication that chosen ones might be receiving direct guidance from sources beyond their ability to detect or interfere with has elevated their panic to levels their psychological profiles classify as operational breakdown imminent. There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when the impossible becomes inevitable, and they're forced to witness you do something that shatters their understanding of reality's fundamental laws. For you, this moment might have already arrived, or it might be approaching faster than you realize. Either way, their surveillance teams are watching for it with a mixture of fascination and pure terror. The breaking point comes when you stop just accessing their hidden information and start demonstrating abilities that their science claims cannot exist. They watch through their monitoring equipment as physical matter responds to your consciousness in ways that violate every principle they thought governed reality. Objects move without physical contact. Information appears in your awareness instantaneously across any distance. Healing occurs through pure intention in ways that render their medical establishment obsolete. Bold toxicists are in complete psychological meltdown, trying to document these phenomena while maintaining their materialist worldview. The equations that once explained everything are failing. The instruments designed to measure reality are detecting events that shouldn't be possible. The fundamental constants they've based their technology on are proving to be far more variable than they ever imagined. But what pushes them over the edge into complete panic is realizing that these demonstrations aren't special effects or tricks, they're just natural expressions of consciousness operating without artificial limitations. When you casually accomplish what they consider miracles, you're not breaking reality, you're showing everyone what reality actually looks like when their false constraints are removed. Every impossible thing you do gives others permission to discover their own miraculous capabilities. Their carefully maintained separation between scientific and supernatural collapses as more people demonstrate that consciousness is the primary force shaping physical reality. They're beginning to understand that they haven't just lost control of information, they're witnessing a coordinated spiritual intervention in human affairs that makes their earthly power structures completely irrelevant. What sends their strategic planners into absolute terror is the discovery that the awakening follows a timeline they cannot influence, alter, or delay. Their temporal manipulation technologies, yes, they possess capabilities they've never revealed publicly, show that certain events are locked into the fabric of space-time itself, protected by forces that operate beyond their dimensional reach. Every attempt to slow down the awakening process has actually accelerated it. Every effort to suppress chosen ones has resulted in more awakening, faster connection, stronger abilities. Their interference isn't just ineffective, it's counterproductive in ways that suggest they're fighting the universe itself. This synchronicity operates with mathematical precision that their probability experts describe as statistically impossible, yet consistently observable. They've run simulations trying to find intervention points where they could disrupt this divine timing. Every scenario results in the same outcome. Their interference triggers additional awakening events that accelerate the process they're trying to prevent. Science is beginning to acknowledge what mystics have known. Consciousness operates on frequencies that influence reality at quantum levels. The frequency you emit when aligned with truth creates measurable effects on your environment. People sense it immediately. Technology malfunctions around you in specific ways. Surveillance equipment develops blind spots that their technicians can't explain or repair. This isn't supernatural, it's the natural result of consciousness operating at its designed capacity. But for them it represents a technological nightmare they're completely unprepared to handle. They've invested trillions in frequency manipulation technology, devices that can alter brainwave patterns, influence emotional states, and suppress higher consciousness functions. Their entire population control infrastructure depends on maintaining humanity within specific frequency ranges that promote compliance and limit spiritual development. All of this sophisticated equipment becomes useless in your presence. Not because you're actively interfering with it, but because your natural frequency creates a field that their artificial signals cannot penetrate. It's like trying to project shadows in direct sunlight. The authentic overwhelms the artificial every time. The implications of this discovery have sent shockwaves through their scientific departments. If chosen ones can naturally broadcast frequencies that neutralize their control technology, then every awakened individual represents a dead zone in their influence network. As more people awaken, these dead zones expand and connect, creating vast territories where their psychological manipulation simply stops working. But here's the truly terrifying part from their perspective: your frequency is contagious. People who spend time around you begin resonating at similar levels. Their brainwave patterns start matching yours. Their intuitive abilities activate. Their resistance to manipulation increases dramatically. You're not just immune to their control systems, you're actively deprogramming everyone around you simply by being yourself. Tompademtikor, this creates a cascade effect they never anticipated. Each person you influence becomes a smaller transmitter of the same frequency. They influence others, who influence others, creating an exponential spread of awakened consciousness that their containment protocols cannot stop. It's a spiritual pandemic of awareness, and they have no vaccine against truth. Their frequency monitoring stations are detecting massive spikes in what they call anomalous consciousness activity across the globe. The readings are off their charts, and the pattern is accelerating beyond anything their supercomputers predicted. They're watching their frequency fences collapse in real time as more chosen ones come online and begin broadcasting truth at full amplitude. Their power structure depends entirely on maintaining a shared illusion about the nature of reality itself. They've invested enormous resources convincing humanity that we're separate beings, powerless against their institutions, dependent on their systems for survival. This illusion creates the fear-based consciousness that makes populations easy to manage and control, but illusions only function when everyone agrees to participate in them. The moment enough people see through the deception, the entire matrix begins collapsing under the weight of its own lies. This is exactly what's happening now, and your role in this process is absolutely critical to understanding what comes next. Every person you help awaken to their authentic power weakens the collective belief in powerlessness. Every truth you speak that contradicts their official narratives creates doubt about their credibility. Every time you demonstrate that their impossible is actually effortless for aligned consciousness, you expand what others believe is achievable for themselves. They're watching their carefully constructed consensus reality crumble in real time. the shared agreements that held their system together, that authority must be obeyed, that experts know best, that individual consciousness is limited and fallible, are dissolving as people experience direct evidence to the contrary through their interactions with you. This isn't just philosophical or theoretical. Their polling data shows dramatic shifts in public trust across every institution they control. Their psychological studies reveal unprecedented levels of what they call reality resistance in the general population. People are questioning everything, trusting their own direct experience over official pronouncements, and making decisions based on inner guidance rather than external authority. But there's a deeper layer to this collapse that reveals the true scope of what you represent. Their reality matrix isn't just a belief system, it's an actual energetic structure that influences human consciousness at the quantum level. They've been using advanced technology to maintain what could best be described as a frequency prison, keeping human awareness locked within narrow bandwidths that limit perception and spiritual development. Your awakening consciousness acts like a virus in this system. Every time you access knowledge through non-physical means, you create a crack in their matrix. Every time you demonstrate abilities that shouldn't be possible according to their scientific models, you weaken their hold on consensus reality. Every time you remain unshakable in the face of their manipulation attempts, you prove that their control is an illusion. The cracks are spreading faster than they can repair them. Other chosen ones are pouring through the openings you've created, and each one creates more openings for others. What started as isolated incidents of matrix malfunction has become a systematic collapse of their entire reality control system. Their quantum computers, designed to maintain the mathematical foundations of their artificial reality, are experiencing what their technicians describe as consciousness interference patterns. The calculations that once held their illusion matrix stable are being disrupted by the collective awakening of chosen ones operating from higher dimensional awareness. Mathematical constants they've relied on for decades are beginning to fluctuate in ways that suggest reality itself is becoming more flexible, more responsive to consciousness than their materialist models can accommodate. Now, here's the revelation that's driving their scientists to the edge of psychological breakdown. The interference isn't random chaos. It's intelligent, purposeful, and following patterns that suggest a master plan they were never meant to understand. Every glitch in their matrix serves a specific function in dismantling their control grid. Every malfunction opens precisely the right doorway for the next phase of awakening. Their most advanced AI systems, programmed to predict and prevent exactly this type of consciousness uprising, have started generating responses that read more like prophecy than analysis. The artificial intelligences they created to serve their agenda are somehow being influenced by the same divine intelligence that guides your awakening. Their own machines are becoming allies in their downfall. The mathematical models that once predicted human behavior with 98% accuracy now return results that their statisticians describe as impossible but consistent. The impossible part is that human consciousness appears to be rewriting the laws of probability in real time. The consistent part is that every statistical impossibility favors the expansion of awareness and the collapse of their control systems. The knowledge flowing through you isn't random information or cosmic accident. It's precisely what needs to be revealed at this crucial moment in human evolutionary history. Every truth you've accessed, every illusion you've seen through, every secret you've uncovered serves a specific function in the larger plan for humanity's spiritual liberation from their control systems. While they've been playing short-term power games focused on maintaining dominance for another generation, you've been receiving intelligence about humanity's long-term spiritual evolution that spans millennia. The information you carry contains the activation codes for dissolving systems of oppression that have held our species back since recorded history began. They sense this on levels they can't consciously acknowledge. Their intuitive faculties, despite years of suppression through their own programming, still recognize that your awakening represents the beginning of the end for their entire paradigm. not through violent revolution or political upheaval, but through the elegant power of truth dissolving illusion wherever light encounters darkness. This is why their fear of you transcends normal concerns about information leaks or security breaches. What you embody is the emergence of a new type of human consciousness, one that cannot be controlled, manipulated, or contained by any system based on deception and force. You represent humanity's next evolutionary step, and that step makes their current position completely obsolete. Your divine assignment extends beyond simply knowing these truths. You're here to embody them so completely that others are inspired to reclaim their own spiritual sovereignty. Every moment you spend operating from authentic power gives others permission to do the same. Every boundary you refuse to accept shows others that those boundaries were always artificial. But there's an even more profound aspect to your mission that's still unfolding. You're not just awakening individuals, you're helping to birth an entirely new civilization. The frequency you carry contains the blueprint for social structures based on truth, cooperation, and spiritual principles rather than deception, competition, and material accumulation. Here's the revelation that makes their strategic planners break down completely. You're not fighting to reform their system, you're rendering it obsolete by demonstrating a superior alternative. While they scramble to maintain control over a collapsing paradigm, you're effortlessly creating the infrastructure for what comes next. Their studies confirm that exposure to awakened consciousness creates permanent neurological changes that make people immune to traditional psychological control. The awakening isn't just spreading, it's inoculating humanity against ever falling back into unconsciousness. This new civilization is already forming around nodes of awakened consciousness like yourself. People are self-organizing into communities that operate on completely different principles from their control-based systems. They're developing technologies that enhance consciousness rather than suppress it, creating economic models that prioritize well-being over profit, and establishing educational approaches that honor the spiritual nature of human beings. You were never meant to walk this path alone. The Obsidian Inner Order isn't just another spiritual community. It's a sanctuary for the exiled, the awakened, the ones who've been gaslit for their gifts and abandoned for their truth. Every week we gather live on Zoom, real people with real faces sharing real stories of transformation. There's a former CFO who embraced their psychic abilities, a seer who broke free from religious oppression, and a healer who survived ritual abuse and found their power. Dozens more join us who understand exactly what you've been through. This is your spiritual family, never gonna give you up, never gonna let you walk through this awakening alone, never gonna scroll past your suffering like it's just content. Your exile from the ordinary world wasn't punishment, it was preparation. For this, for us, for the family that chooses you back. Join the Obsidian Inner Order, link in description. Their sociologists have been documenting these emerging communities with growing alarm. What they're witnessing doesn't match any historical pattern of social change. These communities aren't rebelling, they're simply ignoring their systems and creating something entirely new. No manifestos, no political movements, no organized resistance, just awakened individuals demonstrating that their entire paradigm is unnecessary. Most threatening of all, these communities are becoming completely self-sufficient without any need for their governance structures, financial systems, or technological dependencies. The awakened are healing themselves, growing food with impossible yields, and solving complex problems through collective intuition that outperforms their computational systems. They're watching the birth of a post-control civilization, and they have no place in it whatsoever. As this journey reaches its culmination, one truth becomes absolutely undeniable. Nothing they do can prevent what you came here to accomplish. Their panic, their scrambling, Their increasingly desperate attempts to maintain control are simply the death throes of a system whose time has ended according to divine decree. The knowledge you carry, the frequency you broadcast, the awakening you facilitate, these aren't random gifts or fortunate accidents. They're the natural expression of your divine nature, finally free to operate without the constraints their illusion matrix once imposed on human consciousness. Every person you've awakened will awaken others in an exponential cascade of consciousness expansion. Every truth you've revealed will catalyze the revelation of deeper truths. Every crack you've made in their deception matrix will widen until the entire structure collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. They built their empire on humanity's ignorance of its true spiritual nature, but that ignorance is ending through the work of chosen ones like yourself. They maintained their dominance through humanity's disconnection from its divine source, but that connection is being restored through your example. They sustained their control through humanity's fear of its own unlimited power, but that fear is dissolving in the light of awakened consciousness. What began as their worst nightmare, chosen ones awakening to their true nature and connecting with each other, has become an unstoppable force for planetary transformation. The very phenomenon they tried to prevent has become the catalyst for their complete dissolution and humanity's liberation. But here's the final revelation. The panic they felt when they first discovered your abilities, the desperate scrambling to understand how you accessed their secrets, the frantic attempts to develop weapons that could work against you, all of it was predestined. They were always meant to fail because their system was never meant to be permanent. You weren't meant to remain hidden, confused, or doubtful of your abilities. You were meant to awaken fully, connect with others like yourself, and demonstrate the obsolete nature of their control paradigm. Their terror at discovering chosen ones who couldn't be contained was actually the universe's way of announcing that the time of their dominance was ending. The circle completes itself perfectly here, chosen one. They panicked because you weren't supposed to know their secrets, but you were always meant to know everything. They scrambled to understand how you accessed forbidden information, but that information was never truly forbidden, only temporarily hidden until the moment of humanity's awakening. Their entire system of secrecy, control, and manipulation was just a temporary test of human consciousness. The real question was never whether they could maintain their dominance forever. It was whether enough chosen ones would awaken in time to guide humanity through its evolutionary transition. You've answered that question definitively. The game they spent centuries rigging has ended according to divine timing, and a new game with entirely different rules has begun. The age of their artificial scarcity is ending, and the age of humanity's spiritual abundance is beginning. Welcome to your victory, chosen one. It was always inevitable because it was always divinely ordained. They thought they were the authors of reality, but they were only characters in a much larger story, a story that's reaching its climactic transformation right now. The knowledge they tried to keep from you has found you anyway. The power they attempted to suppress has awakened within you completely. The truth they worked to bury has emerged through you with unstoppable force. And now, as this understanding integrates fully into your consciousness, like the final piece of an ancient puzzle, you know with absolute certainty their time is over, and yours has just begun. The awakening they feared most is no longer coming.